Welcome to PAL Interviews. Today we are interviewing Australian Olympic athlete Brodie Summers. Brodie joins us to share with our students his best tips for developing diligence and pursuing goals with enthusiasm. Mr. Summers, would you like to introduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure. Well, first off, you can call me Brodie. I'm happy to keep it casual. But yeah, my name's Brodie Summers. I'm a member of the Australian ski team. I've been to two Winter Olympic Games, four World Championships. I've competed in more than 40 World Cups representing Australia. I've won multiple World Cup medals, and I'm currently gearing up in my final push. I've got about 9 months for my third Winter Olympics, which will be held in Beijing in China early next year.
That's great, Brady. Well, we have a few questions that our PAL students here have wanted to ask you. So we have 10 and would like to start off with could you describe the moment when you realized you were able to compete in high levels of sport?
Yeah. So what I would say to that is, I don't think there was actually a particular moment per se where I had this moment of realization. I think it was more. I grew up, and my parents instilled the belief in me that if I really wanted something, then I could go out there and do the work to achieve it. So that applies in all areas of my life, whether it's in sport or education or work. And I that's kind of the philosophy that I've operated under my whole life. So yeah, I don't think there was a moment where I thought, I can make it at the top level in this sport, as much as there was just this underlying belief that if I really wanted it, then I could do what I had to make it happen.
Thank you.
And your second question is, what did you like most about your sport?
A lot of things. I like everything about it. I think probably the thing that I uh, so there's two things. The first thing is one, the sport has a phenomenal sense of community. So even though I'm competing against people from other countries all over the world, week in week out during winter, I'm actually really good friends with all of those guys that I'm competing against. So I really enjoy the community aspect of the sport, the fact that we all build each other up as opposed to trying to game each other, or yeah, like yeah, I think it's more of a culture of building everyone up, as opposed to like finding ways to bring people down, or to like just slightly edge out. It's more just about the performances that you do in the sport. So I really enjoyed that. And then the other thing that I would say is probably even a bigger motivator for me personally, thing that I really enjoy about the sport, is that it's immensely challenging. Even for someone like me who's been doing it for as long as I have, and I started in 2006 was when I first started doing the sport, as a junior, and I'm still trying to figure stuff out all the time. It's a really, really technical sport, and it requires a lot of technical ability as well as mental ability, because it's high pressure. A lot of the time, you only get one run to make it count, and that's less than 30 seconds. And there's a lot that can go wrong between the start gate and the finish line. So that constant sense of challenge and that constant feeling of trying to overcome, all of those challenges as they're presented in front of you, it makes for a really satisfying feeling when you actually do overcome those hurdles and those challenges. So that's probably, yeah, those are the things that I appreciate about the sport the most.
Yep, thanks.
So the third question is, how do you remain diligent in your training? Sometimes our students lack motivation and they procrastinate, and they'd like to know how you overcome that.
It's a good question. I think the way in which motivate myself regularly is by thinking about, so I guess I'm a very goal-oriented person, like I think most athletes are, or most successful athletes, I think. So when I think about, what it is that I want to achieve in the sport, that is to be the absolute best that I can be. And that's often reflected in very good results at major events, but also just in the quality of the performances that I can do as an athlete in my sport. So when I think about how I actually want to achieve that, well, there's a point that I want to be at, which is the goal, and there's a point where I'm at currently. And basically I think about, okay, what are the necessary steps in between that goal and where I am now? And I map those out mentally and with my coaches and with my trainers. And those can be physical goals in the gym, and they can be technical goals when I'm training on snow. It can be a whole range of things, but I know that there are things that I have to achieve in order to get to that level. And so if ever I feel like I'm maybe lacking a little bit of motivation, I always think about the bigger goal and what's the major thing that I'm working towards here. And if I basically, the way I think about it is I'll be doing myself a disservice if I don't put in the work in order to achieve that goal. So when I, a helpful thought that I always go through in my mind is, for example, the Olympics is the pinnacle of our sport. So I want to imagine, I imagine myself in the start gate of the Olympic Games, however many months from now, however many years from now, and I want to have a feeling in that start gate that I have done everything that I possibly could have in order to give myself the best possible chance to perform at my best at that major event. So I try and think about it in the future and what's the feeling that I want to have when I'm up there and I've got all of this pressure around me, and you've got TV cameras, you've got huge crowds, you've got, it's once every 4 years. I just want to feel like I've put in all of the work so that I can stand there and be like, no matter what happens, I've done everything that that I needed to get myself here and do my best.
Yeah, thank you.
And number 4 is, what is life like as a professional athlete? And what do you do when you are not training or competing? Do you have any time for yourself?
I really enjoy my life as a professional athlete. Generally, so it's a bit different to, I guess, the standard life path for a lot of people. In winter sports especially, it involves a lot of travel. So for example, this year I'm spending, throughout the whole year, I get maybe 2 months at home tops for the whole year. The rest of the time I'm away with the team on training camps. So it's a lot of time away from home, but I'm always surrounded by like-minded people who are also really driven to achieve their personal goals and objectives. So I really enjoy the fact that I'm in a high performance environment all the time, whether that's my teammates or my coaches or my trainers or my nutritionists, everyone that I work with on a daily basis to optimize my performance. I love the environment that I get to be in because it is geared towards achieving the absolute best that we can achieve as athletes. In terms of life outside of the sport, I definitely find activities for the free time that I do get. So a big one for me when I'm in Melbourne, which is home for me. I love playing golf, especially with my family. That's kind of a family activity that we do. That's probably the the thing that consumes the majority of my attention outside of skiing. Cycling's another one. But I've also, whilst being an athlete, I've also completed a degree in finance at Monash University. So I've that is a genuine major interest of mine and an area that I hope to get into when I do retire from the sport in the coming years. So Yeah, definitely. I think it's good as an athlete to have passions and pursuits outside of your sport, because it gives you some balance mentally. Because I think if you just focus on your sport all the time, it's easy to burn out, and I've seen it before. So I think having something to shift your attention onto when you do finish a long day at training is actually a really good thing, and something that can actually improve your performance as an athlete.
Okay, so fifth question is, how do you build your mindset to be strong? And our past students have read that you've been injured in your ACL, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, so I unfortunately I've had a bit of a bumpy, no pun intended, injury history in the sport. So I've had two major injuries in my career. One was my lower back at the Sochi Olympics in 2014, and then the other was the ACL that you just mentioned at the 2018 Olympics. So yeah, obviously those are, as an athlete, that's probably, I think, one of the most difficult things you're ever going to have to deal with and overcome is major setbacks like that, especially when they're at peak moments. But I think really the way I approach it is kind of the same as what I was describing before in terms of motivation and using goal setting in order to make sure that you get the most out of yourself and you put in the necessary work to achieve your best in what you're doing. So for me, I'll use the example of the ACL. I did it 5.5 months out from the Olympics in Korea, and that, so in order to get that, have surgery to have the knee reconstructed, and then do all of the necessary rehab and get yourself back to I guess elite status, it typically takes on average roughly 12 months for most athletes. But I decided to do it in that 5.5 month window that I had. And therefore I had to work really closely with my trainers and my physios and my support team in order to map out exactly what goals I had to achieve and at what points in that period of time in order to be considered able to compete and represent Australia at those Olympics. So I think working with someone to help you establish goals, someone that knows and understands what the necessary requirements are, is a really big asset to have. And then if that person can also, if you can have a constant dialogue with that person, they can help keep you on track. So there were days, especially when I first had the surgery, where I had to relearn how to even just walk again, and that when you've been walking your whole life and someone's teaching you how to walk again, it seems pretty it's pretty frustrating and can be a bit mundane. But just having someone there to bounce off of and to always keep you I guess on track and working towards the necessary things that you have to achieve is a great asset and a great way to make sure you stay on track to achieving what you need to.
Thank you.
Your sixth question is, what were some of the biggest challenges you had to overcome to get where you are now?
I would say, so those injuries definitely stand out in my mind as some of the more significant ones that I've had to overcome. Other than that, I think, to be honest, I can't really complain about the road that I've had to get to where I am now. I've had a lot of opportunity, and when that opportunity has presented itself, I've tried to do my absolute best to seize it. And before doing that, you first got to recognize that those opportunities are there. So I think I've done a decent job of that. And then when I have hit bumps in the road, I've leveraged my network around me, my support network, and I've used them to help me get back to where I need to be. And that can be anyone from your family through to, I mean, family is always a big one, especially for me, but also through to your team around you. And you know, depending on what sport you do, you'll have different teammates and different coaches and things like that to help support you. But yeah, I think you know, I've just genuinely I've just enjoyed the process of what I've been working towards my whole career as an athlete, and I think focusing on the process and trying to derive as much enjoyment from that as you can is a great piece of advice for anyone in just about any pursuit. But I think especially for athletes, because what we do as athletes can be very repetitive a lot of the time, and that can be where sometimes motivation maybe lacks a little bit when you're doing the same thing day in and day out, and it's always hard. And yeah, like some of those training sessions are pretty tough to motivate yourself to do. But just trying to find the enjoyment in it. You know, what's the reason you originally started doing it? It was to have fun, right? So I try and do that every day in training, whether it's in the gym or on the hill.
Yeah. So question 7 is, how do you stop negative talk? Sometimes when the student makes mistakes or sees that the opposition players are bigger than them, they lose confidence in themselves. How do you overcome that?
Negative talk. I would say, so first off, don't beat yourself up for having those thoughts, because I think it's very common for most people, and especially when you're younger and you're still trying to figure out who you are and how you naturally want to approach things. But what I would say is one of the biggest things that helps me when I am in those situations where, you know, maybe I could be, in the past I would have been susceptible to negative self-talk, would be to shift the focus back to the variables that I can or you can control. So if, you know, in that example that you just gave, if there's a player on another team that's much bigger than you are, that's not something that is in your control. You know, the size of the opponents on the other team is not something that you can control. So why would you worry about something that is out of your control and you have no hope of actually being able to change in any way? What you can change is how you interpret it and how you adjust your approach based off of the given information. So in my sport, it's a judge sport. So, you know, I could focus on what the judges are thinking, but what's that really going to get me, versus focusing on the actual execution of the specific parts of the run that I need to do in order to get a good score. So to put it simply, my focus is much more productive when it's on things that I can actually control and manipulate myself, versus when it's on things that I have no hope of actually being able to change. So I think always keeping the focus on things that you can control is a great way of dealing with that sort of negative self-talk that can creep in. But like I said, it's something that I think it takes time as an athlete to develop that and to learn what are the right things to focus on in this situation, and what are the things that are just going to waste my energy if I focus on them.
Thank you.
Question number 8 is, if you could go back time to give some advice to your year 7 self, what would you say?
Make sure you remember to always enjoy it. would be the first thought that comes to my mind. Is, yeah, I think there was a moment there where I think this is probably common for a lot of athletes. I probably got a little bit too concentrated on outcomes, and I forgot to just enjoy the process of working towards making myself a better skier every day. And I think a lot of people are susceptible to falling into that trap. So just one of the biggest things that I found when I hurt my knee leading up to the last Olympics, I couldn't ski for a long time, and not being able to ski for that period of time made me, I really missed it. I almost took it for granted after a while, like, because I always got to ski. But then when it got taken away from me, I realized how much I missed it. And then so after coming back from that, I've just always, even if the weather sucks or the conditions are really challenging out on snow or whatever it is, I've just always made sure to remind myself that this is what I love doing. And no matter what the conditions are like, I'm still enjoying what I do in this situation. So yeah, that's probably what I'd tell myself in my year 7 self, is just to enjoy the process and make sure you maximize every opportunity that you've got.
Yeah.
Question 9 is, how has competing at the highest level changed you as a person?
Well, I think because that is a good question, by the way. I think because I've been doing it for so long, it's completely shaped the way I am as a person, who I am as a person. I think kind of what I alluded to before, being an elite athlete, you're fortunate enough to be surrounded by other like-minded people who are all equally as focused on high performance as you are. So I think being around the best of the best can only make you better, because I truly believe you are a product of the environment in which you spend the bulk of your time. And I've been fortunate enough to be surrounded by high performance most of my life as an athlete. So I think hopefully that's rubbed off on me in some way, shape or form. And I think it's true for myself and all of my teammates and competitors. We all make each other better than we would be if we didn't have each other, if that makes sense. Humans do really pick up on what's going on around them and what people are doing around them, even if it's just by osmosis, even if you're not consciously processing it. Your subconscious picks up a lot of these things. So surrounding myself with peak performers, I think has hopefully shaped me into a better person, a better athlete, and just a more high performing individual.
And your final question is, after you finish competing, what do you want to do?
I suppose I touched on it a little bit earlier, but so like I said, I've got a degree in finance, and I absolutely love following financial markets, and I'm a huge fan of investing with my own money personally, and I hope to turn that into a career someday when I'm older. So I mean, it's probably not too far away now, because I'm getting kind of old for a mogul skier at 27 years of age. So I think probably be in the next year or two. See how I feel after these next Olympics. But yeah, I think I would love to establish a career in the funds management space and work towards achieving my goals in that area once I'm finished with skiing. But I think, you know, if you're a competitive person, you'll probably always crave some level of competition. So I think I'll have to maybe look for other areas in my life where I can still get my fix of a competitive environment as well. So maybe that'll be golf or something like that in the future.
How did you get into competing in the Olympics? Like, what was the process?
So in Australia, we're actually really lucky in winter sports to have very established pathways. So For me, that was, I started with inter-schools skiing competition. So, like the sport that you would do on if it's a Saturday or a Wednesday or whatever day of the week, you compete against other schools in sport. We got to do that with skiing. And then from there, I developed a bit of a passion, and then was able to convince my mum and dad to sign me up for one of the club programs at Mount Buller down here in Victoria. And I worked there for a couple of years and probably turned my passion into a bit of an obsession. And then after a couple of years there, I qualified to get onto the national development team, which is I was contracted through the New South Wales Institute of Sport, and I had to move up to Perisher in New South Wales to start training up there for the winter. And then a few years after that, I achieved the necessary results to get onto the full the senior Australian team, and have been there ever since. So, and then in terms of actually qualifying for the Olympics, the way you do it is you have to be, there's specific criteria which you have to meet by competing at a certain level of competition. So for us, it's World Cup skiing competitions, and I have to be in what's called the Olympic adjusted top 30 in the world. And that is basically the top 30 in the world, accounting for the fact that you can only send 4 people per gender per nation to win Olympic Games for each discipline, or for moguls. So if there were, say for example, in the past, the Canadian team has been a really strong team. If there were 6 athletes who were in the top 30 in the world, but only 4 of them got to go to the Olympics, that means the Olympic top 30 the Olympic adjusted top 30 would actually be the top 32, because those 2 that were 5 and 6 from Canada wouldn't get to go. So it's actually, I mean, it sounds a little bit technical and maybe a little bit daunting, but I mean, maybe because I've been doing it for a while now, I don't think it's that hard to get to the Olympics. But then again, I've done a lot of work over the course of my life, and maybe that's just the position I've found myself in. So
Thank you.
And another question for me is, how many days did you train in a week?
I pretty much train every day, except so it's a bit different. So when I'm on a training camp, which is away from home, and I'm doing technical training, so on snow or jumping on the water ramp, we generally go in 4-day cycles where you get 1 day off for every 3 days of training. So you go 3 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off, like that. And we don't really have weekends or anything like that. You just work on like we call it like training camp mode. So days of the week don't really mean much. It's just day 1, 2, 3, or 4. But when I'm in Melbourne, I generally train. So Monday to Friday, I would have 2 training sessions a day, usually. Some of them will be lifting, some of them will be conditioning, some of them will be speed and plyometrics and things like that. And then I also train once on Saturday, and then I give myself Sunday, usually to play golf with my family. But it's a lot of training. It's actually one of the most important things that we do. We have to protect our body. The sport is obviously quite high impact and can be dangerous if you're not physically ready to meet the demands of it. So we have to spend a lot of time in the gym to train and make sure that our bodies are physically ready to stand up to the demands of the sport.
Thank you, Brodie.
No worries.
We hope you enjoy our interview with Olympic athlete Brodie Summers. If you would like to keep up to date with Brodie's journey, you can follow him on Instagram at Brodie Summers or on Facebook by searching out Brodie Summers Athlete. Thank you for joining us. We will see you at our next interview. Bye for now.